The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under the door while Maya Chen was getting her daughter ready for school. She found it after Emma had left, the paper still crisp and official, looking against the worn carpet of their apartment. 30 days. That's all she had left before they would be on the street. Again. Maya stood in the narrow kitchen, the notice trembling in her hands, and felt the familiar weight of failure pressing down on her chest. This was the third apartment in 2 years. Each time, she had promised Emma it would be different. Each time, she had been wrong. The medical bills from her daughter's asthma treatments had drained everything. The part-time job at the diner barely covered food. The second job cleaning offices at night kept them just close enough to survival that she couldn't quite give up, but never close enough to feel safe. She was 32 years old, and she felt ancient. The apartment was silent now, Emma's laughter from this morning already feeling like a memory from someone else's life. Maya walked to the window and looked out at the grey November sky. Somewhere out there, other people were living normal lives. They were buying groceries without calculating every dollar. They were making plans that extended beyond next week. They had futures that felt solid instead of constantly shifting beneath their feet. She folded the eviction notice carefully and placed it in the drawer with the others. The stack was getting thick. Medical bills, past due utilities, collection letters. A comprehensive record of everything she couldn't fix. Her phone buzzed. Another text from her sister, Claire. The same text she'd been sending for months, with slight variations. You need to accept reality. Emma deserves stability. Let Mark's parents help. Maya deleted it without responding. Mark's parents. The people who had blamed her for their son leaving. The people who had made it clear that if Maya would just admit she was an unfit mother, they would take Emma and give her the life she deserved. A life without struggle, without evictions. Without a mother who couldn't keep them housed for more than a few months at a time. The thought made her physically ill. Emma was hers. The one thing in her life that was pure and good and worth fighting for. She would live in her car before she let them take her daughter. She had nearly done exactly that twice already. The morning stretched on, empty and heavy. Maya should have been getting ready for her shift at the diner, but she couldn't seem to move. The eviction notice had taken something from her, some last reserve of forward momentum. She sat at the small kitchen table and opened her laptop, a machine so old it wheezed when it started up. The screen flickered to life, and she stared at the search bar without knowing what she was looking for. Hope, probably. Some miracle that existed in the space between one disaster and the next. She had been searching for cheaper apartments when the ad appeared. It was buried so deep in the listings that it seemed almost hidden on purpose. A property auction. Estate sale. Abandoned observatory in rural New Mexico. Starting bid, $1. Maya clicked on it without thinking, drawn by the absurdity of it. $1. The listing was sparse, almost hostile in its brevity. The property had belonged to a deceased astronomer. No heirs. The building was structurally unsound. Solar observation equipment included but non-functional. Purchaser responsible for all back taxes, demolition if necessary, and cleanup. The county wanted it gone. They wanted someone, anyone, to take responsibility for it. There were 3 photos. The first showed a strange, dome-shaped building perched on a hilltop, its white paint peeling, its copper dome turned green with age. The second was a distant shot that revealed how isolated the property was, surrounded by nothing but desert and scrub brush for miles. The third was an interior shot, poorly lit, showing what looked like a circular room with a massive telescope mount in the center. It looked like something from a science fiction film, abandoned, forgotten, completely impractical. Maya stared at those photos for a long time. Her practical mind, the one that had kept her and Emma alive through 2 years of barely surviving, told her to close the laptop and forget about it. She didn't need another problem. She needed money, stability, a real solution. Not some decaying building in the middle of nowhere that she couldn't even afford to demolish. But something else, something smaller and more desperate, whispered differently. $1. The words circled in her mind like a prayer. For $1, she could own something. Not rent, not borrow, not beg from someone who would hold it over her head forever. Own. Even if it was worthless, even if it was nothing more than a pile of metal and broken dreams in the desert, it would be hers. She read the listing again, slower this time, trying to find the trap. The back taxes were listed, $1,200 annually. The property was 2 acres. The structure was approximately 4,000 square feet. Access road was maintained by the county. No utilities currently connected, but infrastructure was present. The auction was online, ending in 3 days. Maya did the math. If she won the bid at $1, she would need to pay the back taxes immediately. 6 years unpaid meant $7,200. It might as well have been $7 million. She had exactly $438 in her checking account. That was supposed to last another 2 weeks, until her next paycheck. It was supposed to cover food, gas, and the copay for Emma's inhaler refill. She closed the laptop. This was insane. She was spiraling. Desperation was making her see opportunities where there were only new ways to fail. But that night, after Emma was asleep, Maya opened the laptop again. She found herself reading everything she could about the property. The astronomer who had built it was named Dr. Elias Hartwell. He had been brilliant, semi-famous in certain circles. He had spent 40 years observing solar phenomena from this isolated observatory. He had published papers that other scientists cited. He had been obsessive, eccentric, devoted to his work above everything else. He had died 5 years ago. No family, no will. The property had sat empty while the county tried to figure out what to do with it. They had put it up for auction twice before, but no one had bid. The cost of dealing with it was too high. The location was too remote. The building was too specialized to repurpose. Maya found an old article about Dr. Hartwell from a science magazine. The photograph showed a thin man with wild white hair, standing in front of the observatory, his expression intense and distant. The article described his life's work, his contributions to solar physics, his rejection of academic institutions in favor of solitary observation. There was something in his eyes that Maya recognized. The look of someone who had bet everything on one thing and refused to accept any other outcome. She found herself returning to the auction listing. The current bid was still $1. No one wanted this place. No one except her, apparently, and she couldn't even explain why she wanted it. Maybe it was the desperation. Maybe it was the exhaustion of fighting for apartments she couldn't keep, and jobs that didn't pay enough, and a life that never quite solidified into something stable. Maybe she just needed to make one choice that was completely her own, even if it destroyed her. On Thursday morning, Maya called in sick to the diner. She spent the day researching everything she could about the property, about taxes, about what would actually be required if she won the bid. The numbers were brutal. Even if she somehow came up with the back taxes, she would need money for basic utilities, for repairs, for making the place remotely livable. She would need to move there, which meant leaving behind her jobs, Emma's school, the few support systems they had. It was impossible. Every rational part of her brain screamed that she needed to walk away. But Thursday night, Maya created an auction account. She verified her identity, entered her banking information, and sat with her finger hovering over the bid button. $1. Such a small amount. Such an enormous commitment. Emma was asleep in the next room. her breathing slightly rough from the asthma that never quite went away. Maya thought about the eviction notice in the drawer. She thought about Mark's parents and their offers that came with conditions she could never accept. She thought about working 2 jobs and still sinking deeper every month. She thought about the look on Emma's face when they had to move again, the quiet acceptance that had replaced her daughter's questions about why they couldn't stay anywhere. Maya placed the bid. $1. The screen confirmed it. She was now the highest bidder on a worthless property in the middle of nowhere. She closed the laptop and sat in the dark, waiting to feel regret. Instead, she felt something that might have been hope or might have been desperation. At this point, she wasn't sure there was a difference. The auction closed on Saturday afternoon. Maya won with her bid of $1. No one else had even tried. The confirmation email arrived with instructions for payment and transfer of title. She had 7 days to pay the back taxes, or the property would revert to the county and she would lose her dollar. 7 days to come up with $7,200 that she didn't have. Maya told Emma that night. They sat together on the couch. Emma curled against her side, and Maya tried to explain what she had done. She kept her voice light, almost playful, as if this were an adventure instead of a catastrophe in slow motion. She told Emma about the observatory, about the telescope, about the desert and the stars. She didn't mention the eviction notice or the impossibility of what she was attempting. She just described it as a new start, a place that would be theirs. Emma listened with wide eyes. At 8 years old, she had learned not to get too excited about promises, but she couldn't quite hide the flicker of hope that crossed her face. "Will I have my own room?" she asked quietly. Maya felt her heart break and heal simultaneously. "Yes, baby, you'll have your own room." On Sunday, Maya told her sister. Claire's response was immediate and exactly what Maya had expected. "Are you out of your mind? You bought an abandoned building in the desert for $1? Maya, this is insane even for you. You can't afford this. You don't have the money for the taxes, let alone fixing whatever disaster you've bought. This is exactly the kind of reckless decision that proves you're not thinking clearly." Maya had been ready for this. She had practiced her response, kept her voice steady. "I know it sounds crazy, but Claire, I'm getting evicted again. I'm out of options. At least this way, Emma and I will have a roof over our heads that no one can take away. You can't live in an abandoned observatory. There's no plumbing, no electricity. What are you going to do? Camp out while you pretend this was a good idea? And what about Emma's school? Her doctors? You're going to drag her to the middle of nowhere because you're too proud to accept help? Help?" Maya's voice sharpened. "You mean letting Mark's parents take Emma? That's not help, Claire. That's giving up. It's called putting your daughter first, something you've been failing at for 2 years now. You're homeless, Maya. You're about to be on the street. And instead of doing the responsible thing, you're chasing some insane fantasy about living in a broken-down building in the desert. When are you going to grow up and face reality?" Maya ended the call without saying goodbye. She sat in the silence of the apartment that was no longer hers and felt the familiar isolation settling in. Claire didn't understand. No one did. They all saw her decisions as reckless, or desperate, or irresponsible. None of them saw that she was drowning and grabbing for anything that might keep her head above water for one more day. On Monday, Maya went to the bank. She withdrew every dollar from her checking account, $438. She added it to the envelope where she had been keeping tips from the diner. Another $212, $650 total. She needed $7,200. The impossibility of it should have stopped her. Instead, it made her more determined. She started selling everything she owned that had any value. The television went first, sold to a neighbor for $80. Her laptop, the ancient machine that barely worked, sold online for $50. Her winter coat, barely worn, brought in $40. Emma's old toys, the ones she had outgrown, went to a consignment shop for $30 more. She sold books, kitchen appliances, anything that could be converted to cash. Her co-workers at the diner noticed. Maria, who worked the morning shift, cornered her in the back during a lull. "What's going on, Maya? People are saying you're selling everything. Are you in trouble?" Maya tied her apron and avoided eye contact. "I'm fine. Just decluttering." "Decluttering?" Maria's voice was flat with disbelief. "You sold your microwave, Maya. That's not decluttering. That's desperation. If you need money, you can ask for advances on your paycheck. We can work something out." "I'm handling it." "Are you? Because it looks like you're falling apart." Maya turned to face her, and whatever Maria saw in her expression made her take a step back. "I'm handling it," Maya repeated. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She was exhausted and terrified and running on the kind of determination that felt more like stubbornness than courage. But she kept going. Every hour at the diner, every shift cleaning offices, every dollar scraped together brought her infinitesimally closer to impossible. By Wednesday, she had $2,100. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. And time was running out. That night, Maya did something she had sworn she would never do. She called her mother. They hadn't spoken in over a year, not since her mother had sided with Mark's parents about Emma's custody. The phone rang 4 times before her mother answered, her voice cautious. "Maya? Mom, I need to ask you something. I need to borrow money. Not much, just $5,000. I'll pay you back. I promise. I just need time." The silence on the other end was long enough that Maya thought the call had dropped. Then her mother spoke, her voice careful and sad. "Maya, honey, we've talked about this. I can't enable your bad decisions anymore. Every time I help you, you just get into worse trouble. I love you, but I can't keep watching you destroy yourself. If you really want help, the kind that matters, you need to let Emma go to people who can provide for her properly." Maya hung up. She didn't slam the phone down or cry or scream. She just ended the call and sat in the dark apartment, feeling the last threads of her support system fray and snap. Everyone in her life was convinced she was making a mistake. Maybe they were right. Maybe this whole thing was just another disaster that would prove them all correct about her inability to make good choices. But she couldn't stop now. She had committed. She had made a promise to Emma. And more than that, she had made a promise to herself that she would not give up. Not this time. Not ever. On Thursday morning, Maya took a shift at the diner she normally had off. She worked through her break, through lunch, accepting every table and every demanding customer with forced patience. During the dinner rush, a regular customer, Mr. Patterson, an elderly man who came in every Thursday, asked her how she was doing. It was a reflex question, the kind people asked without expecting a real answer. Maya, exhausted and running on 2 hours of sleep, told him the truth. She didn't mean to. The words just fell out. She told him about the eviction, about the observatory, about the taxes due in 3 days, and the money she didn't have. She told him everything while refilling his coffee, the story spilling out like a confession. Mr. Patterson listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, he took out his wallet, pulled out a business card, and handed it to her. "My grandson runs a charity foundation. They help single parents in crisis. Call this number tomorrow. Tell them I referred you. No promises, but they might be able to help." Maya looked at the card. Her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. "I don't need charity. she said automatically. Yes, you do, Mr. Patterson said gently. And there's no shame in that. You're working 3 jobs and selling everything you own to keep your daughter fed and housed. You're not lazy, Maya. You're drowning. Let someone throw you a rope. That night, Maya called the number on the card. She left a message, explaining her situation, trying to sound coherent and worthy of help instead of desperate and delusional. She didn't expect a response. In her experience, help was something promised far more often than delivered. But Friday morning, her phone rang. A woman named Sandra from the foundation wanted to meet with her. They talked for 30 minutes. Sandra asked about Emma, about the medical bills, about Maya's work history, and her plans for the observatory. She asked questions that felt invasive and necessary all at once. At the end of the call, Sandra said she would need to discuss it with the board, but she thought they might be able to help. We typically provide grants for housing deposits and first month's rent, Sandra explained. This is an unusual situation. An observatory is not exactly standard housing. But if you can demonstrate that the property can be made livable, and that you have a realistic plan for supporting yourself and your daughter, we might be able to approve emergency funding for the back taxes. Maya felt something crack open in her chest. Not hope, not yet. Hope was too dangerous. But possibility, the faint outline of a path forward. Thank you, she managed. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, Sandra said. The board meets Monday. You'll have your answer by Monday afternoon. In the meantime, start working on that plan. We'll need to see documentation, proof that this isn't just a desperate impulse. Maya spent the weekend working on the plan. She researched grants for rural housing rehabilitation. She found programs for disconnected utilities. She mapped out job opportunities in the nearest town, 40 miles from the observatory. She created spreadsheets and timelines and budgets that looked almost convincing if you didn't think too hard about how fragile they all were. Sunday night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark, listening to Emma breathe in the next room, and thought about all the ways this could still fall apart. The foundation could say no. The county could refuse to extend her deadline. The observatory could be even worse than the photos suggested. She could drag her daughter into the desert and fail just as spectacularly as she had failed everywhere else. But Monday afternoon, Sandra called back. The foundation had approved emergency funding, $5,000, paid directly to the county for the back taxes. It came with conditions, of course. Monthly check-ins, progress reports, proof that Emma was enrolled in school and had access to medical care. If Maya failed to meet those conditions, the foundation could request repayment. Maya agreed to everything. She would have agreed to almost anything at that point. When she hung up, she sat on the floor of the apartment and cried for the first time in months. Not tears of relief or joy, but something more complicated. Gratitude mixed with terror. Hope mixed with the bone-deep knowledge that she was betting everything on a property she had never seen in person, purchased for $1, in a desperate attempt to prove everyone wrong. The money was transferred Tuesday morning. By noon, Maya had paid the back taxes, and the property was officially hers. The title arrived by email, a PDF with her name on it. Maya Chen, owner of 2 acres and 1 solar observatory in rural New Mexico. It felt surreal and terrifying and irreversible. That afternoon, Maya gave notice at both her jobs. Her manager at the diner looked at her like she had announced she was moving to Mars. "You're quitting to move to an abandoned observatory? Maya, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" "I'm fine," Maya said. It had become her standard response, a lie she told so often it almost felt true. "I'm just making a change." She packed everything they owned into her 15-year-old Honda Civic. It didn't take long. 2 years of evictions had taught her not to accumulate anything that wouldn't fit in a car. Clothes, Emma's school supplies, the box of medical records, and bills she couldn't seem to throw away. Everything else had been sold or given away. On Wednesday morning, Maya pulled Emma out of school. The secretary processed the withdrawal with barely concealed judgment. "Moving mid-semester is very disruptive for children," she said, as if Maya didn't know, as if she had any choice. Emma sat in the car, quiet and watchful, as they drove away from the only home she had known for the past 8 months. She didn't ask questions. She had learned not to. She just held her stuffed rabbit and looked out the window as the city disappeared behind them. Maya's phone buzzed constantly as they drove. Her sister, her mother, her former co-workers, everyone suddenly concerned about her welfare, now that she was actually leaving. None of them offering anything concrete, just worry and judgment disguised as care. She turned her phone off and focused on driving. The highway stretched ahead, flat and endless. New Mexico appeared gradually, the landscape shifting from green to brown to something that looked almost hostile in its emptiness. Hours passed. Emma fell asleep. Maya kept driving, her hands tight on the steering wheel, her mind circling the same thoughts on an endless loop. What if the observatory was worse than she imagined? What if there was no way to make it livable? What if she had just dragged her daughter into the desert to fail in a new location? What if she was about to prove everyone right? The GPS directed her off the highway onto a smaller road, then onto a dirt track that barely qualified as a road at all. The Civic bounced and lurched over ruts and rocks. Dust rose in clouds behind them. Emma woke up, rubbing her eyes. "Where are we?" "Almost there, baby," Maya said, though she had no idea if that was true. The observatory appeared suddenly, rising from the desert like something from another world. The photos had not done it justice. It was larger than Maya had imagined. A massive white dome perched on a circular base, surrounded by smaller outbuildings. The paint was peeling in sheets, revealing rust underneath. The copper dome had turned the color of old pennies. Windows were cracked or missing entirely. The whole structure leaned slightly, as if exhausted from decades of standing against the wind. It looked exactly like what it was, a place someone had abandoned and no one wanted. Maya pulled up beside it and turned off the car. Silence flooded in, thick and complete. No traffic, no voices, no signs of human life anywhere. Just the desert, the wind, and this strange building that now belonged to her. Emma pressed her face against the window. "Is this it? This is ours?" Maya tried to find words that were truthful without being crushing. "Yes, baby, this is ours." They got out of the car slowly. The wind caught Emma's hair, whipping it around her face. She looked small and fragile against the vastness of the landscape. Maya felt her resolve waver. What had she done? This wasn't a home. This was barely a structure. She had brought her daughter to the end of the world and called it hope. But Emma surprised her. She walked up to the observatory, placed her hand against the sun-warmed metal, and smiled. "It looks like a spaceship," she said, "like something from my books." Maya felt tears threatening again. She blinked them back and took Emma's hand. "Let's look inside." The door was locked, but the key had been included in the title transfer documents. Maya fitted it into the old lock and pushed. The door resisted, swollen from years of weather, then gave way suddenly. They stepped inside, and the desert disappeared. The interior was vast and circular, rising to a point far above them, where the copper dome created a ceiling that seemed almost cathedral-like in its scope. The massive telescope mount dominated the center of the space. a complex array of metal and glass that had once pointed at the sun with scientific precision. Now it pointed at nothing, its mechanisms frozen, its lenses clouded. Dust covered everything: the floor, the equipment, the walls. It wasn't the dust of neglect. It was the dust of time, of a place where no one had walked for years. Their footsteps left clear prints, as if they were the first humans to step on a new planet. Emma's voice echoed in the space. Wow. Maya turned slowly, taking it all in. There were workbenches along the walls, still cluttered with tools and papers. Filing cabinets stood in neat rows near what had once been an office area. A narrow staircase led upward to a platform near the dome. Everything was preserved, frozen, in the moment. Dr. Hartwell had walked out for the last time. They explored slowly, carefully. The building was bigger than Maya had realized. There were 4 rooms attached to the main observation chamber. What had been Dr. Hartwell's living quarters consisted of a bedroom, a small bathroom, and a kitchen area. The facilities were minimal but present. Plumbing existed, though whether it worked was another question. Electrical panels lined one wall, dormant but intact. In the bedroom, a narrow bed sat against the wall, still made, the blanket pulled tight. A closet held a few items of clothing, stiff with age. On a small desk sat a photograph in a dusty frame. Maya picked it up and wiped it clean. The photograph showed Dr. Hartwell, younger, standing beside a woman with dark hair and a gentle smile. They both looked happy, unaware of what was coming. Emma tugged on Maya's sleeve. "Mom, there's a door down here. It's heavy." Maya followed her daughter to the back of the observation chamber. Set into the floor was a metal hatch, circular and secured with a wheel lock. Maya tried turning it, but it wouldn't budge. Years of rust had sealed it shut. She made a mental note to come back to it later with tools she didn't currently have. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring, making lists of what needed to be fixed. The list grew long quickly. The plumbing needed to be restarted. The electrical system needed inspection. The dome mechanism was frozen. Windows needed replacing. The roof leaked in several places. The amount of work was staggering. As the sun began to set, Maya and Emma sat on the front steps of the observatory, sharing granola bars and water. The desert transformed around them, the harsh daylight giving way to softer colors. The temperature dropped quickly. Emma leaned against her mother, tired but not complaining. "Do you like it?" Maya asked quietly. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "It feels like ours. Not like the apartments that belong to other people. This is ours." Maya wrapped her arm around her daughter and watched the stars begin to appear. The sky here was different from the city. Clearer, brighter, vast, in a way that made her feel both insignificant and strangely hopeful. Dr. Hartwell had chosen this place for a reason. He had seen something here worth dedicating his life to. Maybe Maya could too. That night, they slept in the car, the observatory looming beside them like a guardian or a warning. Maya couldn't tell which. She lay awake long after Emma had drifted off, staring at the building she now owned, and wondering how long it would take before everyone's predictions came true. How long before she failed here, just like she had failed everywhere else. But failure, she was learning, was relative. She had managed to get here. Against all odds, against all advice, she had bought this property and paid the taxes and transported her daughter across 3 states to start over in a place no sane person would choose. Maybe that wasn't failure. Maybe that was survival. And maybe, just maybe, survival was enough for now. The desert wind picked up, rattling something loose on the observatory's exterior. Maya closed her eyes and tried to believe in possibility. Somewhere in this strange building, in this impossible situation, There had to be a way forward. She just had to find it. And she would, because giving up had never been an option, and it wasn't going to start being one now. The first week at the observatory passed in a blur of back-breaking work and small victories that felt enormous in their context. Maya woke each morning before dawn, her body aching from sleeping in the car, and threw herself at the mountain of problems the building presented. Emma helped where she could, holding flashlights, sorting through boxes of old equipment, keeping her mother company in the echoing spaces. The water was the first priority. Maya spent 2 days tracing the plumbing system, trying to understand how Dr. Hartwell had managed to survive out here. She found a well system, its pump ancient, but miraculously functional. After hours of cleaning filters and bleeding air from the lines, water finally coughed and sputtered from the taps. It ran brown for several minutes before clearing to something that looked almost drinkable. Maya tested it with a kit she'd bought in town, and when it came back safe, she cried again. Small victories. The electricity took longer. The solar panels Dr. Hartwell had installed were still on the roof, though years of neglect had rendered most of them useless. Maya climbed up with borrowed tools and cleaned what she could, reconnected what had come loose. When she finally restored power to the building, 3 lights flickered on in the main chamber. 3 lights out of dozens, but it was enough to see by, enough to keep working. The nearest town was called Soledad, 40 miles away down that terrible dirt road. Population 800, most of them suspicious of outsiders. Maya made the drive twice in that first week, buying supplies they needed immediately: food, cleaning products, basic tools. Each trip depleted their funds at an alarming rate. She had exactly $1,400 left from everything she'd scraped together. It would not last long. On her second trip to town, Maya stopped at the post office to establish a mailing address. The woman behind the counter, weathered and direct, looked at the observatory's coordinates and raised an eyebrow. The Hartwell place? You bought that? I did, Maya said, hearing the defensive edge in her own voice before she could stop it. Huh. The woman processed the paperwork slowly. Folks tried to sell that place for years. Most figured it'd just sit there till it fell down. Takes a certain kind of person to want to live that far from everything. What kind of person is that? Maya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. The woman handed over the forms, the kind that's either running from something or looking for something, sometimes both. Dr. Hartwell was looking, I think. Spent 40 years looking. Not sure he ever found it. Maya left without asking what he'd been looking for. She had her own things to find, like a way to pay next month's taxes and keep her daughter fed. Philosophy could wait. Emma started remote schooling. The district in Soledad reluctantly agreeing to enroll her and provide internet access through a subsidized hotspot. She did her lessons at a makeshift desk Maya had constructed from an old workbench and some crates. Between assignments, Emma explored, cataloging the observatory's contents with the methodical attention only an 8-year-old could maintain. Mom, she called one afternoon from somewhere in the storage area. There are so many books here. Like, hundreds. Maya joined her in what had been Dr. Hartwell's library. Metal shelves lined the walls, packed tight with volumes on astronomy, physics, solar phenomena. Technical manuals sat beside philosophical treatises on the nature of time and light. Emma had pulled out a large leather-bound journal and was carefully turning its pages. What's that? Maya asked. His diary, I think. It's hard to read. His handwriting is really messy. Maya took the journal gently. The pages were filled with cramped notes, diagrams of solar patterns, calculations that meant nothing to her. But interspersed among the science were more personal entries. Brief glimpses into the mind of a man who had chosen solitude over society. One entry, dated 30 years earlier, caught her attention. Another eclipse today. The shadow crossed at precisely the calculated angle. In the moment of totality, when day becomes night and night becomes day, I feel closest to understanding. The boundary between light and dark is where truth lives. Catherine would have loved this. I miss her still. Maya closed the journal carefully. Dr. Hartwell had lost someone. That much was clear. And he had come here, to this impossible place, to study the sun and remember someone who was gone. The thought made the observatory feel less like a structure and more like a monument, a temple to grief and stubborn persistence. Over the following days, Maya began to notice details she had missed in her initial survey of the property. The observatory wasn't just a single building. There were outbuildings she hadn't fully explored. A small shed contained more solar panels, some broken, some intact. Another structure, half buried by wind-blown sand, turned out to be a generator room with a diesel backup system. The generator was dead, but its presence suggested Dr. Hartwell had built redundancy into everything. He had planned to stay here forever. The main observation chamber remained the heart of the complex. Maya spent hours studying the massive telescope mount, trying to understand its purpose. This wasn't a night telescope, designed to peer at distant galaxies. This was a solar telescope, built to stare directly at the sun through specialized filters and lenses. The equipment was sophisticated beyond anything Maya had expected. This hadn't been some amateur hobby. Dr. Hartwell had been conducting serious research. She found his observation logs in a filing cabinet, thousands of pages, meticulously dated, recording solar flare activity, sunspot patterns, coronal mass ejections. The data stretched back 40 years, an unbroken chain of daily observations. The dedication it represented was staggering. One man, alone in the desert, watching the sun rise and set and rise again, recording everything he saw with patient precision. Emma called from across the chamber. "Mom, I think I found something weird." Maya joined her near the edge of the room, where Emma was examining the wall. The observation chamber was perfectly circular, its walls smooth concrete. But here, in one section, the wall looked different. The texture was slightly off, the color not quite matching. Maya ran her hand along the surface. It felt hollow. She knocked gently. The sound that came back was definitely hollow. This wasn't load-bearing wall. This was covering something. "Good eye, Em," Maya said. "I think there might be a space behind here." They searched for a way to access it, looking for seams or handles. Maya found nothing until she noticed the filing cabinet positioned against that section of wall. It was the only piece of furniture that seemed deliberately placed rather than casually left. She tried to move it. It wouldn't budge. Emma crouched down. "Mom, there are wheels on the bottom, but they're locked or something." Maya knelt beside her daughter. The filing cabinet did have wheels, but they were seized with age. She went to get tools, returning with a screwdriver and a can of lubricant she'd found in the shed. After 20 minutes of work, the wheels finally rolled. Maya and Emma pushed the cabinet aside. Behind it was a door, not an obvious door, but a section of wall that had been designed to open. There was a small keyhole, old-fashioned, the kind that required a skeleton key. "Where's the key?" Emma asked. Maya had no idea. She hadn't found anything like that among Dr. Hartwell's possessions. She tried the obvious places first, the desk drawers, the bedroom, the kitchen. Nothing. Then she remembered the photograph she'd found, the one of Dr. Hartwell and the woman who must have been Catherine. Maya retrieved it from the desk and examined the frame more carefully. The backing was loose. She pried it open, and a small key fell out. Old brass, delicate, exactly right for the lock. Maya and Emma looked at each other. "Should we?" Emma asked. "It's our house now," Maya said, though her hands shook slightly as she fitted the key into the lock. "Whatever's in here belongs to us." The lock turned smoothly, as if it had been maintained even after Dr. Hartwell stopped using whatever lay beyond. Maya pushed gently, and the door swung inward on silent hinges. Beyond was darkness. Maya shone her flashlight inside and saw stairs leading down. Not a closet or a storage space, a staircase, descending beneath the observatory. "Wait here," Maya told Emma. "No way," Emma said firmly. "We're exploring together." Maya wanted to argue, wanted to protect her daughter from whatever strangeness might wait below. But Emma's expression was set. They had come this far together. They would go farther together too. They descended carefully, the flashlight beam cutting through absolute darkness. The stairs were concrete, well made, leading down at least 20 feet. At the bottom, Maya's light revealed another door, this one steel, with a heavy bolt lock. It was not locked. She pulled the bolt aside and pushed. The room beyond took Maya's breath away. It was a chamber, roughly circular, carved directly into the bedrock beneath the observatory. The walls were smooth stone, the floor polished concrete. But what filled the space made no immediate sense. Equipment covered every surface. Computer monitors, dark now but clearly sophisticated. Data storage units, stacked floor to ceiling. Seismographs, barometers, radiation detectors. A massive bank of servers hummed softly, still powered by some independent system. And dominating the center of the room was something that looked like a vault, a heavy steel door with a combination lock built directly into the stone floor. Emma's voice was small in the enclosed space. "What is this place?" Maya moved through the room slowly, trying to understand what she was seeing. This wasn't storage. This was a working laboratory, a command center for research, far beyond casual solar observation. The equipment was expensive, professional grade. Some of it looked decades old, but some looked recent, as if it had been installed or updated in the last few years. She found a workstation with a logbook sitting open beside a darkened monitor. The handwriting was Dr. Hartwell's, but the tone was different from his observation journals. These entries were technical, urgent. The 18th of December, 2019. Seismic activity consistent with previous models. The chamber remains stable. Shielding effectiveness confirmed at 99.7%. Countdown adjusted. 127 days until optimal alignment. Maya flipped back through pages. The entries stretched back 2 years before Dr. Hartwell's death, growing more frequent as they approached a specific date. The language became increasingly focused on something called the convergence, a phenomenon Dr. Hartwell had apparently been anticipating. The 15th of March 2020. Final preparations complete. The solar eclipse on the 21st of August 2020 will create the precise conditions needed. Shadow totality at this longitude will last 2 minutes, 47 seconds. In that window, the chamber's contents can be safely accessed. After that, the next viable window occurs in 2045. I will not survive to see it. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the underground chamber. She flipped forward to August 2020. The entries stopped abruptly on August 19th, 2 days before the eclipse Dr. Hartwell had been counting toward. The 19th of August 2020. Chest pain worsening. Refused to go to hospital. So close now. Just 2 more days. The work must be completed. Catherine, if there is any consciousness beyond this, please let me reach the moment we planned for. There were no more entries. Dr. Hartwell had died before his eclipse arrived, before whatever he had been preparing for could be completed. Maya turned to the vault in the floor. It was a serious piece of engineering, the kind of safe used by banks or museums. The combination lock was mechanical, requiring a sequence she had no way of knowing. She tried anyway, spinning the dial randomly. Nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. Emma had found another section of the wall covered in diagrams. She called Maya over. "Look at these." The diagrams were complex, showing the relationship between the observatory above and the chamber below. Lines traced the path of sunlight during different times of year, angles calculated with precision. But one diagram was marked differently, highlighted in red. It showed the path of an eclipse shadow, the narrow corridor of totality passing directly over the observatory. The date written beside it was the 21st of August 2020, 4 years ago. "The eclipse only shadows her grave," Emma read aloud from a note written in the margin. "What does that mean?" Maya stared at the words. Her grave. Catherine's grave. She thought about the way Dr. Hartwell had spoken of her in his journals, the way he had built this entire monument to light and shadow. Had he buried something down here? Or someone? She moved back to the vault, examining it more carefully. The steel door was set flush with the floor, sealed tight. But around its edges, she noticed something odd. The concrete surrounding the vault was different, newer than the rest of the floor. This vault had been installed after the chamber was built. It had been added deliberately, placed precisely beneath the observation point, where the eclipse shadow would pass. Maya climbed the stairs and returned to the main chamber above. She stood in the center, looking up at the copper dome, trying to visualize the path of sunlight. The observatory had been positioned with exacting care. Dr. Hartwell hadn't just wanted to observe the sun. He had wanted to align something with it, to create a specific geometric relationship between the light above and whatever lay in the vault below. Over the next several days, Maya became obsessed with understanding what Dr. Hartwell had been trying to accomplish. She read through every journal, every log entry, every scrap of paper she could find. Emma helped, organizing documents by date, creating a timeline of Dr. Hartwell's research. A picture emerged gradually. Dr. Hartwell hadn't just been studying solar phenomena. He had been waiting for a specific astronomical event, an eclipse that would pass over this exact location with precise timing. And he had built the vault to take advantage of that moment. But why? What could possibly require such elaborate preparation? Maya found references to shielding in multiple documents. Dr. Hartwell had been concerned about radiation, about electromagnetic interference. The chamber beneath the observatory was designed to block these things, to create a perfectly isolated environment. The vault added another layer of protection. Whatever was inside was being guarded against forces Maya didn't fully understand. She found financial records too, hidden in a locked drawer she'd managed to pry open. Dr. Hartwell had not been wealthy, but he hadn't been poor either. His modest salary from years of academic work had been supplemented by something else: consulting fees, paid monthly by a company whose name meant nothing to Maya. Helios, Secure Holdings. The payments had been substantial, $50,000 per month for the last 5 years of Dr. Hartwell's life. $3 million total. For what? The records didn't say. But the timing coincided with the installation of the vault and the most sophisticated equipment in the underground chamber. Maya tried researching Helios Secure Holdings. The company existed, registered in Delaware, but its actual operations were opaque. Their website was minimal, offering no real information about what they did. Financial services, the site claimed vaguely. Asset protection. Nothing that explained why. They had been paying an isolated astronomer millions of dollars. The pieces didn't fit together, or rather, they fit together in ways that made Maya increasingly uneasy. She had bought this property thinking it was simply an abandoned observatory. Now it appeared to be something else entirely. A carefully constructed vault, holding something valuable enough to justify millions in protection. And she owned it. The thought should have been exciting. Instead, it filled her with dread. Because if whatever was in that vault was worth that much money, then other people knew about it. And sooner or later, they would come looking for it. Maya was right to be worried. On the 10th day, after their arrival, she saw dust on the horizon. A vehicle approaching fast on the dirt road. Not the slow, cautious approach of a curious neighbor. This was someone who knew where they were going. "Emma, go to your room," Maya said quietly. "Lock the door and don't come out unless I say so." "Mom." "Now, Emma." Her daughter recognized the tone and obeyed without further argument. Maya watched her disappear into the living quarters, heard the lock click, then turned to face whoever was coming. The vehicle was a black SUV, expensive and completely out of place in the desert. It pulled up beside Maya's dusty Civic and stopped. Two people got out. A man in his 50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Maya's car, and a younger woman in business casual, carrying a tablet. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Chen, my name is Richard Voss. I represent Helios Secure Holdings. I believe we need to talk about the property you've purchased." Maya's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "The property is mine. I have the title." "Of course you do," Voss said smoothly. "No one is disputing that. But I don't think you understand what you've acquired. Dr. Hartwell was conducting work for our company. Work that remains incomplete. We have a significant financial interest in this property and its contents." "What contents?" Maya asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "Don't play games, Miss Chen. You've been here 10 days. I'm sure you've explored thoroughly. You've found the chamber. You've seen the vault. What you need to understand is that the material in that vault belongs to Helios, not to you. Dr. Hartwell was holding it in trust for us. Now that he's gone, we need to reclaim it." "And if I refuse?" Voss's smile hardened. "I would strongly advise against refusal. The vault contains material worth approximately $758 million. That's not an exaggeration, Miss Chen. $750 million. Do you really think you're equipped to handle that kind of asset? Do you think you can protect it from the people who will come looking for it once word gets out?" Maya felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. $758 million. The number was so large, it felt fictional. "What's in the vault? That's confidential. What matters is that it's ours, and we're prepared to compensate you fairly for your cooperation. We'll pay you $1 million to sign over access to the vault and agree to certain confidentiality terms. You can walk away from this property with enough money to start a real life. Or you can try to claim something you don't understand and won't be able to keep." Maya looked at this man in his expensive suit, standing in the desert like he owned it, and felt something harden inside her. She had spent 2 years being told what she couldn't handle, what she couldn't keep, what she didn't deserve. Everyone in her life had assumed she would fail. And now this stranger was offering her money to step aside and let him take what was hers. "No," Maya said. Voss blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said no. The property is mine. Whatever's in that vault is mine. You can make whatever claims you want, but unless you have a legal document that proves ownership, you need to leave." The woman with the tablet spoke for the first time. "Miss Chen, we're trying to be reasonable. But if you force us to pursue legal channels, this becomes much more complicated for you. We have resources you can't match. Then use them, Maya said. Sue me. Take me to court. But get off my property. Voss studied her for a long moment. His friendly facade had evaporated entirely. You're making a mistake. A very serious mistake. It wouldn't be my first, Maya said. And I'm still standing. They left without another word, the black SUV churning up dust as it sped away. Maya watched until it disappeared, then let herself collapse against the observatory wall, shaking. She had just rejected $1 million and threatened a company with resources she couldn't even imagine. She had probably just signed herself up for a legal battle she couldn't afford and couldn't win. But the vault was hers. Whatever was inside, whatever Dr. Hartwell had been protecting, it belonged to her now, and she would die before she let someone take it. Emma emerged from her room cautiously. Who was that? Trouble, Maya said honestly. But we've handled trouble before. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She went down to the chamber and sat beside the vault, running her hands over its cold steel surface. $758 million. The number kept circling in her mind. What could possibly be worth that much? What had Dr. Hartwell been hiding? She thought about the eclipse he had been waiting for. The 21st of August 2020. The shadow passing over her grave. The timing, the precision, the years of preparation. It all pointed to something that required a specific moment to access. But that moment had passed 4 years ago, while Dr. Hartwell lay dying. Or had it? Maya pulled out her phone and searched for eclipse predictions. She scrolled through years of data until she found what she was looking for. Another total solar eclipse, passing over this exact longitude. The date made her breath catch. The 8th of April, 2024. 3 months from now. The shadow was returning. Whatever window Dr. Hartwell had been waiting for was about to open again. And Maya was the only person standing between it and the people who wanted what was inside. She looked at the vault, at the complex lock mechanism, at the careful engineering that had gone into sealing something away. Then, she made a decision. She would figure out how to open it. She would discover what was worth $750 million. And when the eclipse came, when the shadow fell across her grave, she would be ready. Because she hadn't come this far, survived this much, fought this hard, just to hand victory to people who thought she didn't deserve it. She had bought this property for $1 and paid for it with everything she had. Whatever lay beneath this desert belonged to her, and she was going to claim it. The weeks following Richard Voss's visit transformed Maya's understanding of what she was facing. This was no longer about survival or proving people wrong. This was about protecting something she didn't fully understand from forces she couldn't see. And the clock was ticking toward April 8th with relentless precision. She started by researching everything she could about Helios Secure Holdings. The company remained frustratingly opaque, but Maya was nothing if not persistent. She spent hours in the Soledad library, using their internet connection to dig through corporate filings, news archives, and financial databases. What she found painted a troubling picture. Helios wasn't a typical investment firm. They specialized in what industry insiders called exotic asset protection, rare art, classified documents, materials that couldn't be held in conventional storage. They catered to clients who needed absolute security and absolute discretion. Their facilities were rumored to be scattered across the country, hidden in unremarkable locations, protected by layers of security that made bank vaults look simple. And they had trusted Dr. Hartwell to hold something for them, something worth $758 million. The question that kept Maya awake at night was simple. Why here? Why had they allowed such a valuable asset to sit in an isolated observatory with a single aging scientist as its guardian? The answer, she gradually realized, was in the vault itself. Whatever was inside required the specific conditions Dr. Hartwell had created. The electromagnetic shielding, the radiation protection, the precise alignment with astronomical events. This wasn't just about security. This was about preservation. Something in that vault needed to be protected not just from thieves, but from time itself. Maya threw herself into understanding Dr. Hartwell's work. She read his technical papers, his research notes, everything he had published during his career. The man had been brilliant, pioneering in his field. His work on solar radiation and its effects on materials had been groundbreaking. He had developed techniques for protecting sensitive equipment from electromagnetic interference that were still used by research institutions worldwide. And then, 20 years ago, he had walked away from it all. He had left his position at a prestigious university, stopped publishing, and disappeared into the desert to build his observatory. The timing coincided with Catherine's death. Maya found an obituary buried in an old newspaper archive. Catherine Hartwell, aged 42, died of cancer, survived by her husband, Elias. The grief must have been crushing, but Dr. Hartwell hadn't simply retreated to mourn. He had spent the next 20 years building something. A monument, yes, but also a machine. A precisely calibrated instrument designed to create the exact conditions needed for whatever was in that vault. Emma became Maya's research assistant, helping catalog documents, organizing findings, asking questions that sometimes revealed connections Maya had missed. Her daughter had a natural gift for pattern recognition, for seeing relationships between seemingly unrelated pieces of information. "Mom," Emma said one evening, spreading papers across their makeshift dining table, "look at these dates. Dr. Hartwell installed the vault in 2015. That's when Helios started paying him. But he started building the underground chamber in 2005, 10 years earlier. He knew what he was going to do a decade before he did it." Maya studied the timeline Emma had created. Her daughter was right. The chamber had been excavated and shielded long before the vault arrived. Dr. Hartwell had been preparing for something specific, planning far in advance. This wasn't a job he had taken on late in life. This was the culmination of decades of work. She found more clues in his personal journals, entries that spoke not of science, but of purpose. "Catherine and I dreamed of changing the world. We believed knowledge could unlock possibilities others couldn't imagine. She's gone now, but the dream remains. I will complete what we began together, even if it takes the rest of my life." Maya felt a strange kinship with this man she had never met. He had lost everything and kept going. He had built something impossible in the middle of nowhere and maintained it through sheer will. He had died reaching for something just beyond his grasp. In many ways, his story mirrored her own. Desperate circumstances, impossible choices, stubborn refusal to give up. But unlike Dr. Hartwell, Maya might actually succeed. She had the property, the vault, and the knowledge he had left behind. She just needed to figure out how to access what he had been protecting. The combination lock on the vault was old-fashioned but sophisticated. 6 numbers, each ranging from 0 to 99. The mathematical possibilities were staggering. Maya couldn't simply guess her way through. She needed to understand how Dr. Hartwell thought. What numbers would have been significant to him? She tried the obvious ones first. Catherine's birthday, their anniversary, the date of her death. Nothing worked. She tried coordinates, eclipse dates, mathematical constants. The vault remained sealed. After 2 weeks of attempts, Maya was ready to scream. Then Emma found something. She had been organizing Dr. Hartwell's books, shelving them by subject, when she noticed one volume that didn't fit. It was a copy of Dante's Inferno, old and worn, the only piece of literature among hundreds of scientific texts. Emma opened it and found handwriting on the inside cover. Not notes, but a dedication. For Catherine, who showed me that even in the darkest places, light finds a way. All my love, Elias. The 12th of June 1984. Their wedding date. Maya tried it on the vault. The 12th of June 2084. Nothing. She tried variations. Still nothing. Then she noticed something else. The date was written in Dr. Hartwell's hand, but there was another notation below it. Lighter, in a different script. Catherine's handwriting. A single line. Canto V. Line 103. Maya's hands shook as she flipped to Canto V of the Inferno. Line 103 inches. The Italian text read, Quel giorno, più non vi leggemmo avanti. That day, we read, no further. The line referred to the story of Paolo and Francesca, doomed lovers whose story had become a meditation on love and loss. But what mattered wasn't the poetry. It was the numbers. Canto 5, line 103. Maya tried the combination. The 1st of May, 2003. The lock didn't turn. She tried other variations. Then, almost as an afterthought, she tried the full reference as coordinates. 510384, using the year from the dedication. The lock clicked. A sound so soft Maya almost missed it. Then another click, and another. The mechanism was engaging, ancient gears turning for the first time in years. Maya held her breath, barely daring to believe it was working. The final click was followed by a deep, resonant thunk. The magnetic seals disengaged. The vault was open. Maya pulled the handle, and the heavy steel door lifted on perfectly balanced hinges. Cold air rushed out, decades of climate-controlled atmosphere escaping into the chamber. She shone her flashlight down into the vault and saw steps, a narrow staircase descending into darkness below. Emma, stay here, Maya said. For once, her daughter didn't argue. The solemnity of the moment had affected them both. Maya descended alone, each step careful, deliberate. The stairs went down 15 feet, ending in a small chamber no larger than a closet. The walls were lined with the same electromagnetic shielding material used in the chamber above, creating a perfect isolation from outside interference. And there, resting on a pedestal in the center of the small space, was a metal case. Sleek, modern, about the size of a briefcase. It was made of some alloy Maya didn't recognize, its surface inscribed with warning labels in multiple languages: electromagnetic radiation, temperature sensitive, authorized access only. Maya lifted the case carefully. It was lighter than she expected, perhaps 20 pounds. She carried it up the stairs and set it on the floor of the main chamber. Emma joined her, both of them staring at this object that had been protected so carefully, hidden so deeply. The case had no visible locks, but it had a digital display panel on one side. Currently dark, unpowered. Maya found a connection port, and, after searching through Dr. Hartwell's equipment, located a compatible cable. She connected the case to one of his monitoring stations and powered it on. The display flickered to life, showing a simple interface. A warning message appeared: environmental conditions must be optimal for safe opening. Current status: unsuitable. Next viable window: April 8, 2024. 13 hours 47 minutes to 13 hours 49 minutes and 47 seconds local time. The Eclipse. The case itself was programmed to the Eclipse. Whatever was inside could only be safely accessed during those 2 minutes and 47 seconds when the moon's shadow passed over the observatory. The precision was staggering. Maya checked the current date, January 14th. 12 weeks until the eclipse. 12 weeks to figure out what she was protecting and how to protect it. She spent the next several days examining the case from every angle, documenting everything about it. The exterior was covered in technical specifications and safety warnings. Whatever was inside was sensitive to electromagnetic radiation, to temperature fluctuations, to atmospheric conditions. The shielding Dr. Hartwell had built wasn't just about security. It was about creating the perfect environment for long-term storage of something extraordinarily delicate. Maya photographed everything and started reaching out carefully to experts who might help her understand what she had. She contacted university physics departments, materials, science laboratories, anyone who might have insights without revealing too much about what she actually possessed. Most ignored her emails. A few responded with polite confusion. One professor, specializing in exotic matter, wrote back with a cryptic message. If you have what your description suggests, you need to be extremely careful who you tell. There are only a handful of substances that require that level of protection, and all of them are worth more than small countries. The response should have comforted Maya. Instead, it terrified her. She was sitting on something valuable beyond her comprehension, in an isolated building, with a young daughter to protect. And powerful people knew exactly where she was. Richard Voss returned 2 weeks later, this time with 3 vehicles and twice as many people. Maya watched them approach from the observatory's upper platform, her stomach knotting with anxiety. She had Emma hide in the underground chamber this time, behind locked doors, with instructions not to come out no matter what she heard. Voss didn't bother with pleasantries this time. Miss Chen, you've had time to reconsider. I'm here to make one final offer. $2 million, paid immediately, in exchange for the vault's contents and your signature on a confidentiality agreement. This is more than generous, given your situation. My situation? Maya kept her voice level. You're broke. You're alone. You're in over your head with something you can't possibly manage. We've been patient, but our patience has limits. Take the money. Walk away. Start over somewhere else. Maya had spent 2 weeks preparing for this moment. She had consulted with a lawyer in Albuquerque, using the last of her money to get professional advice. The lawyer had been blunt. If Helios wanted to crush her in court, they probably could. But they would have to prove ownership of the vault's contents first, which meant revealing what those contents were. And for some reason, they seemed desperate to avoid doing exactly that. I spoke with an attorney, Maya said. Interesting conversation. He explained that possession is 9/10 of the law, especially when it comes to property transferred through legal sale. The vault and its contents are part of the real property I purchased. Unless you can prove they don't belong to me, they're mine. We can prove it, Voss said coldly. Then do it. File your lawsuit. Take me to court. But until you do, you're trespassing on my property, and I'm asking you to leave. One of Voss's companions, a large man who had been standing silently, stepped forward. Maybe we don't need to leave. Maybe we just take what's ours. Maya's hand moved to her pocket, where she had been carrying her phone, already dialed to 911 but not yet connected. You're welcome to try, but I've documented everything. Your first visit is on video. This conversation is being recorded. If anything happens to me or my daughter, all of that goes to the police, the media, and the FBI. I understand Helios values discretion. I wonder how your clients would feel about that kind of exposure. It was a bluff. She had a cheap security camera pointed at the entrance, nothing more. But Voss didn't know that. She watched him calculate the risks, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded to his people. They retreated to their vehicles. You're making powerful enemies, Voss said. Think about what that means for your daughter. I think about my daughter every second of every day, Maya said. That's why I'm fighting, because she deserves to grow up knowing her mother didn't back down when someone tried to take what was hers. They left. Maya watched them disappear, then collapsed against the wall, her legs shaking so badly she couldn't stand. She had just threatened people who could destroy her with a phone call. She had gambled that they wanted secrecy more than they wanted immediate access. She prayed she was right. Emma emerged from the underground chamber. Did it work? For now, Maya said, but they'll be back. And next time, they'll be ready for my threats. She needed allies, real ones. Maya spent the next week reaching out to everyone she could think of. She contacted investigative journalists, explaining that she had evidence of corporate malfeasance without revealing specifics. She reached out to legal aid organizations. She even contacted the FBI field office in Albuquerque, filing a report about intimidation and threats related to her property. Most importantly, she documented everything. She photographed the vault, the case, every page of Dr. Hartwell's journals. She created digital backups and stored them with multiple services. She wrote detailed accounts of every interaction with Helios and shared them with people she trusted. If something happened to her, the information would survive. The response was slower than she hoped, but more substantial than she feared. A journalist from a national newspaper became intrigued by her story. An attorney specializing in property rights offered to take her case pro bono if it came to litigation. The FBI agent she spoke with was skeptical but filed her complaint officially. Small victories, but they created a web of attention that made her slightly harder to silence quietly. As February turned to March, Maya's research into the case's contents became more focused. She had narrowed down the possibilities based on the technical specifications. Whatever was inside required protection from electromagnetic radiation and precise temperature control. It was extraordinarily valuable, but also extraordinarily sensitive. Those factors pointed to a small category of materials. She found her answer in a scientific paper Dr. Hartwell had published 15 years earlier. The paper discussed theoretical storage methods for unstable isotopes, specifically those used in advanced medical treatments and experimental physics. One isotope in particular caught her attention: californium-251, combined with other rare Earth elements in a stable matrix. Maya wasn't a scientist, but she understood enough to grasp the implications. Californium-251 was one of the rarest and most expensive materials on Earth. It was used in cancer treatments, in neutron imaging, in experimental reactors. A single gram cost millions of dollars, and it was incredibly difficult to produce and maintain. It decayed rapidly unless stored under perfect conditions. The case in her underground chamber could contain enough californium-251 and associated rare isotopes to be worth exactly what Voss had claimed: $758 million. Maybe more, depending on purity and stability. Maya sat with this knowledge for several days, understanding finally what Dr. Hartwell had dedicated his life to protecting. Not treasure in the conventional sense, not gold or diamonds or art, but something more valuable to humanity than any of those things. Medical materials that could save lives, scientific resources that could advance human knowledge. Catherine had died of cancer. Elias had spent the rest of his life ensuring that the materials used to fight cancer could be preserved and protected. The eclipse took on new meaning. The electromagnetic surge from the sun, partially blocked during totality, created a brief window when the case could be safely opened without risk of compromising its contents. Dr. Hartwell had calculated everything perfectly. He had built a machine designed to protect the most fragile and valuable materials in existence until the moment they could be safely accessed. And he had died 2 days before that moment arrived. Maya understood now why Helios had been content to let Dr. Hartwell keep the materials. He had created conditions they couldn't replicate. His observatory, his shielding, his precise calculations. They needed this location, this equipment, his lifetime of preparation. They had paid him for access, for expertise, for the guarantee that these irreplaceable materials would survive until they were needed. And now Maya owned it all. The responsibility was crushing. These materials could save lives. They represented years of scientific work, millions of dollars in production costs, potential treatments for people suffering from cancers and other diseases. She couldn't simply keep them. But she couldn't hand them over to people who had threatened her either. The solution came to her gradually, built from pieces of advice and fragments of research. She needed a third party, someone credible, someone powerful enough to stand between her and Helios, someone who could verify what she had and ensure it reached the right hands. She contacted the National Institutes of Health. She reached out to the Department of Energy, which regulated special nuclear materials. She wrote to university research, hospitals. Her message was simple. She possessed rare medical isotopes, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, stored under conditions that met or exceeded all safety protocols. And she was willing to donate them to institutions that could use them for research and treatment. But she needed verification first. She needed experts to confirm what she had and ensure it was handled properly. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 48 hours, Maya had calls from 3 different federal agencies, multiple research institutions, and even congressional staffers who had somehow heard about her offer. Everyone wanted to verify. Everyone wanted to be involved. The potential value was too significant to ignore. Maya scheduled everything for April 9th, the day after the eclipse. She would open the case during the safe window, allow immediate verification of its contents, and then transfer custody to a consortium of research institutions and government agencies that could ensure the materials were used properly. She would receive no payment beyond verification that she had legally acquired property worth $750 million. That verification alone would protect her from Helios's claims. Richard Voss made one more visit in late March. This time, he came alone, driving a modest sedan rather than the black SUVs that had announced his presence before. He looked tired, defeated in a way that made him seem almost human. "You've outmaneuvered us," he said simply. "We didn't think you'd figure out what you had or how to leverage it. We underestimated you." "Everyone does," Maya said. "The materials in that case were entrusted to us by clients who needed absolute security. We can't allow them to simply be given away to government agencies." "Those clients will get their materials back," Maya said, "through proper channels with proper oversight. The research institutions will use them as intended. Your clients will lose nothing except the secrecy they were using to avoid proper regulation." Voss was quiet for a long moment. "Dr. Hartwell would have liked you. He spent 40 years fighting against people who wanted to keep knowledge locked away from those who needed it. He built this place as a protest against profit over progress. I think he'd be satisfied with how this is ending." "You knew him?" Maya asked, surprised. "I met him once, when we first contracted with him. Brilliant man, stubborn as hell. He made us agree that if anything happened to him, the materials would be transferred to whoever owned the property, not automatically returned to us. We thought it was paranoia. Turns out, he was planning for exactly this scenario." Maya felt a chill. Dr. Hartwell had known. Somehow, he had anticipated that his work might outlive him, that someone else might need to finish what he started. He had built protection into the very structure of his agreement with Helios. He had left the door open for someone like her. "Tell your clients they'll get their property back," Maya said. "But they'll get it through official channels, transparent ones. And if they have a problem with that, they can take it up with the federal agencies, who will be verifying everything." Voss nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I hope this works out for you and your daughter. You've earned it." He left, and Maya never saw him again. The eclipse arrived on April 8th with perfect weather. Clear skies, no clouds, visibility unlimited. Maya had spent the previous night preparing, triple-checking every system, ensuring the underground chamber was ready. Representatives from 4 different agencies were present, along with media who had somehow learned about the event. The obscure observatory had become, briefly, the center of significant attention. Emma stood beside her mother as the moon began its transit across the sun. Maya had set up solar viewing glasses, and they watched together as day slowly transformed. The temperature dropped. The light changed, becoming strange and otherworldly. Birds fell silent. The desert held its breath. At 13 hours 47 minutes local time, totality arrived. The world went dark. The sun replaced by a perfect black circle, ringed with white fire. In that moment of impossible beauty, Maya opened the case. The contents were secured in compartments, lined with specialized foam. Small vials, perhaps a dozen, each carefully labeled and sealed. The labels confirmed what Maya had discovered: Californium-251, Einsteinium-254, other rare actinides whose names she could barely pronounce. The materials glowed faintly, their radioactive decay visible even to the naked eye. A physicist from Los Alamos National Laboratory performed immediate verification tests. His hands shook as he worked, understanding the magnitude of what he was examining. "This is extraordinary," he kept saying. "The purity is exceptional. The stability is beyond anything I've seen. These materials are worth more than your initial estimate. Easily 800 million, possibly more." The 2 minutes and 47 seconds of totality passed. Maya sealed the case as the sun returned, light flooding back into the world. It was done. She had opened what Dr. Hartwell had spent 40 years protecting. She had verified its contents in the presence of witnesses who could not be silenced or intimidated. The aftermath moved quickly. Federal agencies took custody of the materials under strict protocols that Maya had negotiated in advance. Every vial was documented, photographed, and secured. Chain of custody paperwork filled folders inches thick. Maya signed form after form, her hand cramping, her mind barely processing what was happening. The legal documentation establishing her ownership and the voluntary transfer of the materials took weeks to finalize. But when it was complete, Maya held papers that changed everything. She had legally possessed property worth over $800 million. She had transferred it voluntarily to institutions that would use it for medical research and cancer treatment. And in exchange, she received recognition as one of the largest charitable donors in the history of medical research. The financial implications were complex. Maya received no direct payment for the materials themselves, but the transfer came with significant tax benefits, established trust funds for research in her name, and most importantly, proof that protected her from any future claims by Helios or their clients. The government's involvement had made the transfer ironclad. No one could claim she had stolen anything or acted improperly. More practically, the publicity surrounding her donation brought opportunities she had never imagined. Speaking engagements about perseverance and unconventional thinking. Consulting offers from organizations dealing with rare materials and property transfers. Book deals. Documentary proposals. Maya turned down most of them. She wasn't interested in fame, but she accepted enough to ensure financial stability. Within 6 months, Maya had money in the bank for the first time in her adult life. Not hundreds of millions, but enough. Enough to pay bills without panic. Enough to take Emma to doctors without calculating copays. Enough to buy food without counting every dollar. Enough to breathe. She used some of the money to properly renovate the observatory. Not to sell it, but to make it livable. She hired contractors to fix the plumbing, upgrade the electrical system, repair the dome mechanism. She installed proper heating and cooling. She turned Dr. Hartwell's Spartan quarters into a real home. The observatory became hers in a way the apartments never had. She learned to operate the telescope, teaching herself solar observation. Emma developed a passion for astronomy, spending hours studying the sun through properly filtered lenses. They watched solar flares together, tracked sunspot cycles, measured radiation levels, just as Dr. Hartwell had done for 40 years. Maya reached out to the community in Soledad, slowly building relationships with people who had initially viewed her with suspicion. She hired locally when she could, supporting the small town's economy. She opened the observatory for school tours, teaching kids about astronomy and persistence. She created a small memorial for Dr. Hartwell in the observation chamber, acknowledging the man who had made everything possible. Her sister called 6 months after the eclipse, after reading about Maya's donation in a national newspaper. The conversation was awkward, stilted. Claire struggled to reconcile the sister she thought she knew with the woman who had accomplished something extraordinary. "I didn't think you could do it," Claire admitted. "I thought you were throwing your life away. I'm sorry I didn't believe in you." "You weren't alone," Maya said, "but I needed people to doubt me. It made proving them wrong more satisfying." Her mother reached out too, attempting reconciliation. That conversation was harder. The wounds were deeper, the betrayals more personal. Maya listened, but kept her distance. Some relationships couldn't be rebuilt, no matter how much success intervened. She had Emma, the observatory, and a life she had carved from nothing. That was enough. Mark's parents made one final attempt to gain custody of Emma, citing Maya's unstable lifestyle and reckless decisions. The judge reviewed their petition alongside documentation of Maya's charitable donation, her stable housing, and Emma's thriving school performance. The case was dismissed so quickly it barely qualified as a hearing. They never contacted Maya again. A year after buying the observatory, Maya stood on the front steps, watching Emma play in the desert. Her daughter was climbing the rocks near the property line, collecting specimens for a science project. She was healthy, happy, confident, in a way she hadn't been in the city. The asthma had improved in the dry air. She had friends now, kids from Soledad who made the trip out to visit, fascinated by the strange building and the telescope that pointed at the sun. Maya thought about the eviction notice that had started everything. The desperate auction search. The $1 bid that everyone thought was insanity. She thought about Richard Voss's offers, her family's doubts, the certainty everyone had that she would fail. She thought about Dr. Hartwell, spending 40 years in solitude to protect something precious. She thought about the eclipse shadow falling across the vault, the moment when light and darkness created the perfect conditions for revelation. "Mom," Emma called, "come look at this. I think I found a geode." Maya walked over to join her daughter, leaving behind the weight of what had been and embracing what was. She had been a single mother on the edge of homelessness, mocked for buying a worthless building for $1. Now she was a woman who had donated $800 million worth of medical materials to institutions that would use them to save lives. She was a mother who could provide for her daughter without fear. She was the owner of an observatory that continued Dr. Hartwell's work, watching the sun rise and set over the desert he had loved. She had been told she was reckless, irresponsible, incapable of making good decisions. And maybe she had been all those things. But she had also been stubborn, determined, unwilling to surrender, even when surrender seemed like the only rational choice. She had taken a gamble on a property no one wanted, fought for it against people with unlimited resources, and won, not through luck, but through sheer unwillingness to give up. The story spread, as stories like this do. News outlets covered it. Bloggers analyzed it. TED Talk invitations arrived. People wanted to know her secret, her strategy, the plan that had led to such an unlikely outcome. Maya always gave them the same answer. There was no secret. She had simply refused to accept that her life had to stay small, broken, and desperate. She had seen an opportunity that looked like disaster and chosen to believe it might be salvation instead. And more often than not, she told them, that's what faith looked like. Not certainty, not confidence, not knowing the outcome in advance. Just the stubborn decision to keep moving forward even when every rational voice insisted you should stop. The sun set over the observatory, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Emma brought her geode to show Maya, who examined it with appropriate enthusiasm. They went inside together, to the home they had built from nothing, surrounded by the equipment that had preserved humanity's most valuable medical resources. That night, Maya updated Dr. Hartwell's observation log, continuing the tradition he had maintained for 40 years. She recorded the day's solar activity, noted atmospheric conditions, documented the slow, patient work of watching the star that made all life possible. At the bottom of the entry, she added a personal note, something Dr. Hartwell had rarely done but she felt compelled to include. 1 year ago today, we arrived with nothing but hope and determination. Today, Emma is thriving. The observatory stands strong. The work continues. Sometimes the most worthless things turn out to be the most valuable, if you're willing to see past what others tell you is true. Catherine and Elias built something remarkable here. We're honored to be its stewards now. She closed the journal and looked up through the dome at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, light was traveling across impossible distances, carrying information about the universe's deepest mysteries. And down here, in a small observatory that had cost $1 and everything she had, Maya Chen had learned that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in the places everyone else abandons. The eclipse had revealed what was in the vault, but it had also revealed what was in Maya herself. Strength she hadn't known she possessed. Courage that looked like foolishness until it succeeded. The capacity to take broken pieces and build something whole, something meaningful, something that mattered. She had been a single mother on the edge of destruction. Now, she was a woman who had changed the landscape of medical research while building a home for her daughter. The transformation hadn't come from magic or luck. It had come from refusing to accept that her circumstances defined her limits. And as Maya turned off the observatory lights and headed to bed, she carried with her the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that the impossible was just another word for what hadn't been accomplished yet. 3 years after the eclipse, Maya Chen stood in the lobby of the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, watching workers carefully position a display case that contained a piece of equipment she recognized intimately. Dr. Elias Hartwell's original solar filter assembly, the one he had used for 40 years to observe the sun from his isolated observatory. The museum had requested it as part of a new exhibition on scientific dedication and unconventional research. Emma, now 11, stood beside her mother, reading the placard the museum had prepared. "Mom, they're calling Dr. Hartwell a visionary guardian of scientific resources. That's pretty cool." Maya smiled. The museum had done right by Elias's memory, framing his work not as eccentricity, but as profound commitment. The exhibition would tell his story alongside hers, presenting them as a continuum rather than separate narratives. One scientist who had devoted his life to protecting invaluable materials, and one desperate mother who had accidentally inherited that mission and seen it through. The curator, a woman named Dr. Patricia Okafor, approached them with the kind of careful enthusiasm Maya had learned to recognize in academics. "Miss Chen, thank you again for agreeing to the loan. Having actual equipment from the observatory makes the exhibition authentic in ways photographs never could." "It belongs here," Maya said simply. "Dr. Hartwell's work deserves to be remembered by more than just the scientific community. He was protecting materials that have already been used in treatments for over 200 cancer patients. That number will only grow." Dr. Okafor nodded. "The medical research institutions have been extraordinary partners in this exhibition. They've provided documentation showing exactly how the isotopes you transferred have been utilized. Real patients, real treatments, real lives saved. It transforms your story from interesting to genuinely heroic." Maya shifted uncomfortably. She had never grown accustomed to being called heroic. She had simply done what needed to be done, made the choices available to her at the time. But she understood the value of the narrative. If her story inspired even one person to take a chance on something everyone else dismissed, it would be worth the discomfort of public attention. The exhibition was scheduled to open in 6 months, timed to coincide with the next solar eclipse visible from North America. Maya had agreed to speak at the opening, though public speaking still terrified her. Emma had encouraged her, pointing out that if she could face down corporate lawyers and federal regulators, she could certainly handle a museum audience. After the meeting, Maya and Emma walked through the museum's other exhibitions, stopping at displays of early telescopes and astronomical instruments. Emma paused at a case containing calculations made by early astronomers, their handwriting cramped and precise across yellowed pages. "It's like Dr. Hartwell's journals," Emma observed. "All these people spending their whole lives measuring things, writing things down, hoping someone would care someday." "And we do care," Maya said. "That's the thing about preservation. You never know which moment, which measurement, which piece of information will turn out to be crucial. So you protect everything and trust that future generations will find value in it." They flew back to New Mexico that evening, landing in Albuquerque and making the familiar drive out to the observatory. The road had been improved over the past 3 years, paved for the first section and properly graded for the rest. The county had approved the work after Maya had agreed to allow limited public access to the observatory for educational purposes. School groups could visit now, learning about solar astronomy in the place where serious research had been conducted for decades. The observatory itself had been transformed while maintaining its essential character. The dome had been restored and repainted, its copper surface treated to preserve the green patina that had developed over years. The observation chamber gleamed with upgraded equipment, including modern solar telescopes that worked alongside Dr. Hartwell's original instruments. Maya had hired a retired astronomer to help maintain the facility and conduct actual research, ensuring the observatory remained a working scientific institution rather than just a museum. But the most significant change was in the surrounding property. Maya had purchased an additional 10 acres from neighboring land, creating a buffer zone around the observatory. She had installed a small residential building separate from the main structure, giving her and Emma proper living space while preserving the observatory's integrity. The house was modest but comfortable, with large windows that looked out across the desert toward distant mountains. Emma had her own room now, decorated with posters of nebulae and galaxies, her desk covered with homework and personal astronomy projects. She had developed a particular interest in stellar life cycles, the processes by which stars were born, lived, and died. Her science fair project on red giants had won regional competition, earning her a scholarship to a summer program at a university observatory. Maya worked from home now, consulting for organizations dealing with complex property transfers and rare asset management. Her experience with the observatory had made her unexpectedly valuable to museums, research institutions, and even government agencies, trying to navigate the intersection of scientific materials and legal ownership. She earned more in a month than she used to earn in a year at the diner, all while maintaining a schedule that let her be present for Emma. But she hadn't forgotten where she came from. Every month, Maya donated to organizations supporting single mothers, homeless families, and people struggling with medical debt. She had established a foundation that provided emergency grants for housing deposits, the kind of lifeline that had saved her when she had needed it most. The foundation was small, operating on a fraction of her consulting income, but it had already helped 37 families avoid eviction or homelessness. The foundation's name was simple: the Catherine and Elias Hartwell Foundation for Second Chances. Maya had named it after the couple whose legacy had transformed her life, honoring the love story that had ultimately led to her salvation. The foundation's logo incorporated an eclipse, the symbol of transformation and revelation that had defined her entire journey. One evening, in late spring, Maya received an unexpected call from Richard Voss. She almost didn't answer, seeing his name on her screen and feeling the old anxiety resurface. But curiosity won out. "Miss Chen," Voss said, his voice carrying none of the hostility from their previous encounters. "I'm calling to inform you that Helios Secure Holdings is closing its operations. Our clients have decided that the regulatory scrutiny triggered by the observatory situation makes our business model untenable." Maya wasn't sure how to respond. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be. It's overdue. We operated in shadows because our clients valued secrecy over accountability. Your actions forced light into those shadows. Several of our clients are now facing investigations into how they acquired the materials they stored with us. It's caused a significant reckoning in several industries." "That wasn't my intention," Maya said honestly. "I just wanted to protect what was mine." "I know, but intentions and consequences rarely align perfectly." Voss paused. "I'm calling because I want you to know that you were right, Doctor. Hartwell built that agreement specifically to prevent materials from being buried in secrecy. He told me, the one time we met, that scientific resources belonged to humanity, not to whoever could afford the best security. I thought he was naive. Turns out, he was just principled." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I spent my career helping people hide valuable things from scrutiny, and in the end, a broke single mother with $1 did more good than I ever did. I wanted you to know that some of us recognize that." He hung up before Maya could respond. She sat with the call for a long time, processing what it meant. Helios closing represented a genuine shift, a small victory in the larger battle over who controlled scientific resources and how they were used. She hadn't set out to change systems or challenge industries, but by refusing to back down, by insisting on transparency and proper channels, she had contributed to changes larger than herself. Emma found her sitting in the gathering darkness, staring out at the observatory silhouetted against the sunset. "You okay, Mom?" "Yeah, baby. Just thinking about how strange life is. 3 years ago, we were living in a car, terrified about where we'd sleep. Now we're part of museum exhibitions and foundation work and regulatory reforms. It doesn't feel real sometimes. Emma sat beside her mother. It's real. We worked for it. You worked for it. We got lucky too. If Dr. Hartwell hadn't set everything up the way he did, if the eclipse timing hadn't been perfect, if 100 things had gone differently. But they didn't, Emma interrupted gently. You made choices, and they worked out. That's not all luck. Maya pulled her daughter close. Emma had grown so much, not just physically but in wisdom and confidence. She was nothing like the quiet, anxious 8-year-old who had arrived at the observatory clutching a stuffed rabbit. She was bold now, curious, unafraid to ask questions or challenge assumptions. The stability of the past 3 years had let her blossom in ways Maya had only dreamed possible. The following week, Maya traveled to Washington, D.C. to testify before a congressional committee examining regulations around rare medical materials. Her invitation had come from a senator who had read about the observatory case and wanted to understand how a private individual had ended up in possession of hundreds of millions in controlled substances without any federal oversight. Maya sat at the witness table, acutely aware of cameras recording her every word, and explained the sequence of events as clearly as she could. The property purchase, the discovery, her attempts to involve proper authorities, the corporate resistance she had faced. She emphasized that the system had failed at multiple points, allowing valuable medical resources to sit in private hands with minimal oversight for decades. Miss Chen, one senator asked, do you believe you acted responsibly in this situation? Maya considered the question carefully. I believe I acted as responsibly as I knew how, given the circumstances. Could someone with more resources or expertise have handled it better? Maybe, but I was a single mother trying to provide for my daughter while navigating systems I didn't fully understand. I made the best choices I could with the information I had. And yet, you ended up making one of the largest charitable donations of medical materials in history, another senator noted. That suggests considerable wisdom. That suggests I had good advisors and got lucky with timing, Maya corrected. I'm not trying to be falsely modest, but I don't want my story to be misunderstood. I wasn't some genius who saw what no one else could see. I was desperate and stubborn. Those qualities happened to serve me well in this specific situation. But they've gotten me in trouble plenty of other times. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Maya answered every question honestly, sometimes admitting ignorance, sometimes pushing back on assumptions. When it ended, she felt drained, but satisfied. She had represented Dr. Hartwell's legacy well, advocating for transparency and proper oversight, while acknowledging the complexity of the issues involved. The resulting legislation, passed 8 months later, created new protocols for private storage of rare medical materials. It established oversight mechanisms, mandatory reporting, and pathways for transferring privately held resources to institutions that could use them appropriately. The law was nicknamed the Hartwell Act, informally, though its official title was far more bureaucratic. Maya was invited to the signing ceremony but declined. She had done what she needed to do. The rest was for others to manage. She was ready to step back from the spotlight and return to the quiet life she had built at the observatory. But quiet proved relative. The Smithsonian exhibition opened to significant media attention, drawing visitors who wanted to see the equipment that had protected such valuable resources and learn about the unlikely chain of events that had revealed them. Maya attended the opening, gave her speech with Emma beside her for moral support, and answered questions from journalists who were fascinated by every detail of her journey. One journalist asked the question Maya had heard variations of dozens of times. Do you ever regret buying the observatory, given all the stress and danger it brought into your life? Maya looked at Emma, who was examining the exhibition displays with intense focus, then back at the journalist. Every single day of that first month, I regretted it. I thought I'd made a catastrophic mistake. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't stop imagining all the ways it would destroy us. But regret and fear are just emotions. They don't actually tell you whether you made the right choice. They just tell you that you're scared. And I was terrified. But I kept going anyway. What would you say to someone facing a similar situation? Someone offered an opportunity that looks insane to everyone else. Maya considered carefully. I'd say do your research, get advice, think it through, but ultimately, trust yourself more than you trust other people's fear. Everyone who told me I was being reckless was protecting themselves from disappointment, not protecting me from failure. They weren't wrong to be concerned, but they weren't necessarily right either. Sometimes, the crazy choice is the only one that leads somewhere better. The exhibition ran for 18 months, seen by over 2 million visitors. It generated renewed interest in Dr. Hartwell's published research, leading to several scientists revisiting his work and discovering insights that had been overlooked during his lifetime. A biography was written, detailing his life with Catherine and his decades of isolation. Maya contributed to it, sharing the journals and documents she had found, helping paint a complete picture of a complex, driven, grief-stricken man who had channeled his loss into something meaningful. On the 4th anniversary of her purchase of the observatory, Maya organized a small ceremony at the site. Representatives from the research institutions that had received the isotopes attended, along with several patients whose treatments had been made possible by those materials. Emma helped coordinate the event, demonstrating organizational skills that made Maya simultaneously proud and aware of how fast her daughter was growing up. One patient, a woman in her 60s who had survived pancreatic cancer using treatments derived from the californium-251 Maya had transferred, approached her during the reception. "I wanted to thank you personally," the woman said. "The doctors told me the isotope used in my treatment came from your donation. Without it, I would have died 2 years ago. Instead, I got to see my granddaughter born and watch her take her first steps." Maya felt tears threatening. She had known intellectually that the materials had saved lives, had seen statistics and medical reports. But standing face to face with someone who existed because of choices Maya had made was overwhelming. "I'm so glad you're here," she managed. "I'm glad you were stubborn enough to fight for what was yours," the woman said. "The doctors explained what you went through. Most people would have given up or taken the easy money. You didn't. Thank you for that." Similar conversations happened throughout the afternoon. Patients, family members, researchers, all expressing gratitude for Maya's role in making their work or survival possible. By the end of the day, Maya felt emotionally exhausted but profoundly grateful. She had set out to provide for her daughter and ended up contributing to something far larger than herself. As the sun set on the anniversary celebration, Maya and Emma climbed to the observation platform at the top of the dome. They sat together watching the desert transform in the fading light. The same view Dr. Hartwell had watched for 40 years. "Do you think he knew?" Emma asked. "Dr. Hartwell, do you think he knew that someday someone like you would finish what he started?" Maya considered the question. "I think he hoped. I think that's why he built the protections into his agreement with Helios, why he left everything so carefully documented. He couldn't know who would come after him, but he made sure that whoever it was would have everything they needed to do the right thing." "You did do the right thing," Emma said firmly. "Everyone says so." "Everyone says so now," Maya corrected gently. When I was making the decisions, it felt like I was fumbling in the dark, hoping I wasn't about to walk off a cliff. That's the thing about doing the right thing, you usually can't tell if it's right until after it's done. You just have to trust yourself and keep moving forward. They sat in comfortable silence as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. The observatory hummed around them, its systems maintaining the careful environmental controls that Dr. Hartwell had designed. Somewhere in research facilities across the country, materials that had been stored here were being used to save lives, advance knowledge, and push the boundaries of what medicine could accomplish. Maya thought about the eviction notice that had started everything, the auction listing that had caught her attention, the single dollar she had bid on a property everyone else thought was worthless. She thought about every moment of doubt, every threat from Helios, every night she had lain awake, terrified that she had destroyed her daughter's future rather than secured it. And she thought about where they were now, safe, stable, purposeful, living in a home that was truly theirs, doing work that mattered, contributing to something larger than survival. The transformation wasn't magical. It had been built from desperation, determination, and the stubborn refusal to accept that her circumstances defined her limits. "I love it here," Emma said softly. "I know it was scary at first, and I know we didn't have anywhere else to go. But I love it here, Mom. This is home." Maya wrapped her arm around her daughter and looked out at the desert that had witnessed their transformation. "Yeah, baby, this is home." And in that moment, sitting atop an observatory purchased for $1 and paid for with everything she had, Maya Chen understood that she had found something more valuable than the $800 million in isotopes she had transferred. She had found proof that broken things could be rebuilt, that desperate choices could lead to extraordinary outcomes, and that sometimes the most worthless things in the world turned out to be priceless. The sun completed its descent, and darkness claimed the desert. But in the observatory, lights glowed steady and warm, a beacon of persistence and possibility in the vast emptiness. A monument to love, loss, determination, and the stubborn belief that tomorrow might be better than today if you refuse to stop reaching for it. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.